I was having my devotions this morning and I saw something that I think may be significant for us. Maybe it'll speak to us as leaders. It's the story of Elizabeth and Mary in Luke chapter 1. Both of them had similar experiences. They were both pregnant, miraculously, similar miracles from the same God, two different people. So you might say that they had similar assignments, and that is to take a full-term baby, birth it into this world, and then parent that child for a specific number of years. And so imagine that you have two leaders with a God-given assignment that looks very, very similar, but in many ways is completely different. Because in Elizabeth's case, she was celebrated. But in Mary's case, not so much. Well, it says in Luke that in Elizabeth's pregnancy, it took away reproach. But with Mary, it probably invoked reproach. We don't know for certain, but in that culture, an unwed mother probably was not celebrated. But on the other hand, Elizabeth, well, she had friends and family celebrating with her. They couldn't believe that at her old age, having been barren her whole life, she is now birthing a child. But Mary, on the other hand, no one's celebrating, no one's coming around her to congratulate her. And so we have two completely different outcomes with very similar miracles and similar assignments. And what does that mean for you and me as leaders? I think it means that we need to be very careful that we don't judge others by the criteria of our sphere. So in other words, God gives us an assignment, God gives us a sphere, and we are to operate within that sphere to maybe evaluate ourselves when necessary, but Paul even warns against that, because I'm not even sure that we're that capable of self-evaluation or self-awareness in order to do that. But regardless, if we do evaluate, let's evaluate ourselves within our sphere and our calling. And just be very careful when you look at someone else with a similar calling in a similar sphere, because maybe one side is celebrated and the other one isn't. Maybe one side is accepted and the other one isn't. Maybe one side is relieved of reproach when another one is the recipient of reproach. We just need to be careful, because people have their own callings and their own assignments. And I think in this political season, we probably see that most clearly in the conduct of pastors and leaders in the church and how they approach the political situation in our nations. And all over the world, we have these situations. And I think it's just unwise for someone from one sphere to judge the conduct of another. In other words, I think that God has players all over the map. Imagine just a huge chessboard with the nations of the earth spread out across an entire room. And God is moving these chess pieces. And some people he has in very overt situations where they're celebrated with large crowds and honored even, but there's others who are more covert. So God has his soldiers behind enemy lines. They have a different assignment than the ones at the line of conflict. And they have a different assignment than the ones behind the line of conflict. All three are necessary. Those behind enemy lines, those at the lines of conflict, and those behind friendly lines. Everybody has an assignment, but watch out that we don't judge other people in their sphere by the criteria that we've adopted in ours. That's unwise. And I think that there's a lot of leaders who are called more into being a political voice. And that's fine. But they shouldn't look at others who are not called into that sphere as though they're not patriotic and don't love their countries. But on the other hand, those that are called into a more of a position where their assignment is not to be so overtly political, let's make sure that those people are not criticizing those ministers who are more political in their voice. And isn't there room for both? Isn't there a need for both? So this can go across the board to unity movements versus the purist movements. certain people that are called into a very strong doctrinal theological realm to hold the line in that realm, and others who perhaps are a little bit more on the fringe, who are called to reach out, to be a lighthouse out near the depths of the ocean to call those ships into safety. Everybody has their assigned sphere, and I just think that it's really unwise to be judging someone else's servant, like Paul said. We are God's servant. He assigns the spheres, and some come with a relieving of reproach, and some come with the addition of reproach. We're not God, so who are we to be judging anybody else when we have a hard time even keeping up with ourselves?